Welcome to Leading Beyond Limits, the podcast where we explore the extraordinary journeys and insights of remarkable leaders who have pushed the boundaries of what's possible. Your host, Angel Radcliffe, who is a digital transformation leader, author, speaker, and financial educator, will lead each episode and dive deep into the stories, strategies, and philosophies that have empowered these exceptional individuals to lead, inspire, and achieve beyond the ordinary. We're about to embark on a journey of discovery and inspiration, and together, we'll learn what it takes to lead beyond limits. So grab your cape, or at least your favorite coffee mug, because we're about to unravel the extraordinary tales of trailblazers who've turned impossible into I'm possible. Let's get started.
In today's episode, we're joined by Kisha Winter, founder and CEO of Winter Ridge Enterprises. With over 2 decades of experience in Fortune 500 companies and global impact that spans 50 countries, Kisha is a trailblazer in women's leadership strategy and creating inclusive workplace cultures. Tune in as Kisha shares powerful insights on how leaders can recognize their unique strengths, advocate for themselves, and command promotions and compensation they deserve. Kisha, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here.
I'm happy to have you on and discuss this topic. I think it's so important for people to understand those ways that you can really own your power and learn how to make more money. That seems to be the topic of discussion these days, the way the economy is going with inflation. And we want to teach people how they can stand up and step out. And I really want our audience to get a chance to know you before we dive into the question. So give us some insights of who you are.
Right now, I am a leadership consultant and executive coach, and I've worked in corporate for 20 years, working with Fortune 500 companies such as General Electric. And one of my passions now is really help organization create inclusive cultures where everyone, regardless of their background, can thrive. And so I'm excited to be here to share with your team.
I'm excited to have you on as well. So you definitely have an extensive corporate journey. Let's talk about how you started off your career in corporate, where it led you to, and then how that transcended into owning your own company.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to start out with the background to your point, because a lot of times people look at you and they're like, oh, wow, she owns her own company. And I didn't say this. You're about to be a published author. You worked 20 years in corporate with people from around 50 countries globally. And they don't realize that you didn't start this way. So for me, even me thinking about my journey, it blows my mind that me, a little immigrant girl from a little island of Jamaica, where today I'm here with these small beginnings, but today I'm here where I am. And I never would have dreamed I would have the honor of working for one of the largest multi-billion dollar global companies where I get to train leaders from all over. But if I'm really honest, it wasn't always this way. I didn't always believe that I could be a leader myself. I didn't always believe that I had a seat at the table. And the reason back in 2006, when I looked at the top of the organizations that I used to work with, the people in leadership didn't look like me or sound like me. And it's not just a demographic thing. Is yes, they were women, they didn't have an accent, but it's also about personality. They weren't introverts. The way we run corporations now, a lot of the time we put on a pedestal extroverted ideals. And so for me, I didn't sometimes think that I belonged in a room because I felt different from the people that were in the room for multiple different reasons. And so that's when this feeling of self-doubt and not being good enough started to surface. But I had a turning point in that, at least the feeling part of it was when an executive, still relatively early in my career, but he asked me to meet with him about his staff and to really give my assessment of his team. And if I'm honest, I felt super intimidated. And I started asking myself questions like, am I going to be able to answer his questions? Will I add any value? Will he regret setting up this meeting? And so even though I was hesitant, I was so focused, and I walked into the room and I just started to naturally share my different point of view, my different perspective. And what blew my mind was that he listening to what I was saying, but he was furiously taking notes, and I was totally taken aback. I'm like, "What is he writing notes about?" Isn't what I'm saying, like, obvious? I'm pretty sure none of this is groundbreaking, but clearly he seemed to think it was because he was taking a lot of notes. And you see, sometimes we undervalue the things that come naturally to us, not realizing that these revelatory insights are groundbreaking for someone else. And just because something is easier for us based on our experience and, even some of our natural talent, we may also assume it's easy for someone else. So we undervalue our talent, we undervalue our genius, we undervalue what we bring to the table. And what I had to learn at that point was that my knowledge, even my difference, was not a liability, was my biggest asset. I had to also learn that I was not only did I belong to the table, but people could learn from me as well. I could teach them a thing or two based on my experience, based on my training. And I had to also learn that I was already enough. I didn't have to wait for an invitation. I didn't have to wait for somebody to give me, that permission. And so one thing that inspired me to even start my business, once I learned that the voice of self-doubt, what people call imposter syndrome and fear, is not the real me, everything changed. And so that is why now what I know for sure is that people, regardless of background, if you empower them, if you teach them what brilliance that they have, if you create the space for them to show up in their unique power, you know, everything, the contribution that they can make to an organization, will be astounding. And that is why I now spend so much of my time teaching people really how to turn that inner critic into that inner coach and how to stand into their unique brilliance and how to own their power and really unleash it.
That's some good information and great insights into your own journey. And, I think owning your power in the workplace is super important, and people have to learn how to actually get to that point. And I think it's not until you reach a certain level in your career or certain confidence in what you're doing that you can really start to own your power. So if you think about someone who is early in their career, what I've seen is people are really afraid to really step up and sort of be that standout and really speak up. So I think speaking up is the most crucial piece of owning your power and understanding that just because that you have a different opinion or you think differently and you want to share an idea doesn't mean that you're going to get fired or lose your job. And you tend to see that with people early in their career, like, well, if I say something and I'm not agreeing. I'm not the yes person, and I'm not agreeing with what leadership says. I'm going to lose my job. And that's what leadership wants. They want people to challenge them. They want people to bring unique ideas and perspectives. And so it's super
Important, Angel. I mean, this story that, just shared really brings up another example that I had. I was in an organization and I was still relatively early in my career. And I was the HR business partner for some chief investment officers, the investment side of our business, all of them. Some of them were, I swear, they were like probably the most senior in terms of age managers in the organization, and I was one of the youngest HR business partners. And I'll never forget, I went in, and sometimes, yes, it's self-doubt is you, but sometimes they say things that make you feel not enough. And so I'll never forget, we had an employee issue, and I just based on my experience and even based on my instincts, I said, you're adding fuel to the fire for this situation, and if you don't address it, this is going to be a employee relations nightmare. This person really is not fighting back because they necessarily want more money. There is more here, and if you just throw money at it, it's not gonna fix the problem, right? Like, but the flip side of that, like every problem that an employee has in an organization is not about money, and I know that. But, good-hearted leader. So I actually shared this with one of the managers, and he said, Keisha, I have got children older than you. Believe you me, I know what I'm talking about. I've been working longer than you've been alive. And so I thought to myself, I said, be that as it may. And I felt so much conviction because I had seen not this exact case, but something similar. And so the truth is, I was dismissed in that conversation. And I said, I don't know, something just bold came up in me. I was like, you're going to so massively regret this that I'm sure we're going to have a discussion in the next month or two. Well, it was like a week later. And let me tell you, that situation escalated so much that we had to get internal and external lawyers involved. It was such a nightmare. And, the leader actually came back to me and they were like, we are not going to make any decisions about consulting with you again. And that honestly gave me so much confidence going forward that it's not about how long you've been working or your age or anything like that. We've got to trust, even when people don't think we have the credibility, lean on the experiences that we've had, even if it's just 1 month or 2 months or a year or two. Because the truth is, at least in this situation, he may have had 30 years of experience. I had even 4 years of experience in the exact area that he was being challenged in. And so, honestly, that gave me so much confidence going forward, that to trust my instincts, trust the knowledge that I have, and really learn to advocate, even if others don't agree, because at the end of the day, hopefully what you're saying is for the benefit of the organization. It's not for yourself, for your own personal gain.
Here's something that I was just sitting here and I'm kind of going into a zone because you talked about someone, it sounds like you're being challenged and being dismissed because of your age and someone that's much older. And I was thinking about my own personal experiences. That's super important for people who you're moving up the ladder and you're young, or even people that look young. Like I look really young. I don't want to say really young, but this is what I'm told. People tell me that when usually they think I'm 20 something, I'm right out of college, and I'm like, I'm like 17 years into my career. How do you find the way to own your power when you're being dismissed or you're being challenged because of your age or because someone's making an assumption? And I remember having my own office, and I was probably the only person in my age range that had an office. I was 27 years old, and there was a lady who had been working at the company 20 years who stomped in there and's like, I've been working here 25 years and I know more than you. And you find people who don't want to listen. Or I remember specifically an instance where we had a client that did not want me representing them because they're like, oh, she's a kid. And I was not.
Mhm.
They thought I was like fresh out of college. But yeah, I was like sitting here and I was like, gosh, like this is kind of resonating. But when you have those challenges in the workplace and you have someone who's like being dismissive or who's challenging you just for whatever particular reason, how do you navigate that to find your power?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. And, I'm really glad we went this direction. Because it happens, right? Especially when we think about those of us that look younger, because I do have that same blessing, I would say, as well. But challenge, when you're early in your career, it doesn't feel great. And so back into what some of the things that I tapped into in that story is, first of all, when you're being dismissed and ignored, a lot of times you can internalize that. So the first step is, we talk about owning your power, is recognizing the value that you bring to the table and changing that inner critic, that self-doubt, that's negative self-talk, into a positive self-talk, and into coaching yourself rather than criticizing yourself. What does a coach do? A coach not only encourages you and cheerleads you, but a coach will help you to identify what you actually bring to the table. So literally getting a pen and paper and writing down, remembering the training that you've had, the experience, the school you went to, the training, the knowledge you've gathered, the life experiences you've had, the experiences on the job you've had. There's a reason why I knew that was going to turn south, is because I had 2 or 3 issues where we thought it was a salary issue. So we thought we are going to throw money at the people, but really they weren't happy with the culture of the organization. They weren't happy working on the team. So no amount of money, it might assuage the challenge for a short period of time. But at the end of the day, the underlying issue was not being addressed. And so I had to go back and I had to think to myself, I was just like, they think they know, but I know I know. And so really owning that, and owning that based on not just your feeling, but based on your background and your experience that you've had before. So that's the first step. The second step is learning how to communicate that effectively. And I said, listen, I agree with you. Frankly, I mean, there's no other way I would have won with this audience. I agree with you. You've probably been working 30 plus years, longer than I've been alive, but this is what I've been in my short 5 years. This is what I've experienced. And I gave them example. This is what I have seen. And this is the mistake that typically leaders make. And this is actually what should be done instead. So I'm giving them actual benchmark data or actual specific examples to show that, yes, I have the experience. And then ultimately, the decision is going to lie on that person, especially if we're thinking about power dynamics. And so I even addressed that in the conversation. I said, look, like you're going to make the decision that you're going to make regardless of what is said, but this is my experience, this is my perspective, and this is why. And then ultimately, they make the decision. In this case, they made the bad decision, but when it didn't turn out right, they knew exactly who to come back to and they knew exactly why because I explained why it wasn't going to work. And then it gave me so much credibility that frankly, we had the situation escalated such a point that we had to sit with the CEO of the organization. And there was no meeting about the issue with the CEO that I wasn't invited to. And going forward after that, every decision they made, they consulted with me on it before. But I wouldn't have had that respect if I would have just been passive about it. I was very direct and I dug my heel in, but ultimately they made their decision. And when it didn't work out, they knew exactly why and they gave me credit for it. People will respect you when you have a backbone. Now, you have to know how to do it in a way that is not confrontational, but it's still firm. And at the end of the day, that's one of the things that won me over because they were like, you know what? You were direct, you were firm about it, and you were right.
And you have to have a backbone. And it's almost just like advocating for yourself and learning how to do it without being aggressive or coming across as aggressive. So I think it's all in the presentation and how you package it, but you have to learn to speak up. And of course, like these parts are very intricate to navigate, but it's super important in owning your power. And I want to transition into really like standing out. Like this is just one piece of standing out. But when you think about someone who's wanting to be up for promotion or wanting to move forward for additional compensation, like what other things should someone be doing in the workplace to get that promotion and make themselves known and make themselves that stand out to say, I am worth more money?
Yeah. So that's two parts. We'll talk about the promotion piece, but it does lead into getting paid more, right? Because with promotions, hopefully, you're gonna get paid more. I have a proprietary method that I call it's a four-step method to help you advance professional. It's called the Diva method. And the D, I'll start with what each of them stand for and why it's important. First of all, backing up a little bit, I think a lot of people think that getting ahead is just about putting your head down and working hard. A lot of people still believe that. Just get the work done. Let my results and my hard work speak for itself. Your hard work and your results will not speak for itself if nobody's listening or if there is not an audience for it. And so I tell people, yes, delivering results, which is a D in the Diva method, is important because frankly, it probably won't get you in the door if you're not delivering results. And you probably won't stay employed if you're not doing your job and delivering results. But that's what that D is for. It's helping you to begin to build a brand, to be known as someone who delivers, and someone who has what we call a high say-do ratio that they do 100% or close to 100% of what they're going to do. That's credibility. That's the basis of building a strong brand. However, it's not the only thing because as I said, you could be working hard and deliver some, but if nobody knows about it, you're probably going to be in that same position for the next 20 years and you don't want that. So the next thing is that it's about building your image, which is you talked about it a little bit, Angel, is your personal brand. And one of the tactical exercises that I love to give people to do this is asking folks really, what is it? If you take a step back and you think about what my strengths or my differentiators are, if you could give me 5 different words to describe my strengths, and you're asking, I would say anywhere from 6 to 10 or 5 to 10 people that you worked with at some capacity at different levels in the organization and in different roles, whether or not it's clients or peers, And it's really easy. You send them a text and you say, what are the 5 words? When I did this exercise in my career, some of the things that folks said about me is that you are direct, you're honest. They felt like, especially being in an HR role, when there was a lot of conversations behind the scenes around promotions, like they were like, I don't know if my manager's going to tell me exactly what was said in the room about me, but I know Keisha will. So that was part of my brand. And so that's one of the exercises that I did. But on the flip side, I also ask for, and I recommend people, those same individuals, you ask them for one sentence that describes, if I work on this one thing, this is going to take my effectiveness to the next level, right? It's a development area, but you're not asking it as a development area question. It's like, what's the one thing if I work on it, it's going to make me that much more impactful or that much more effective? You text these 2 questions to 5 to 10 people that you know, so don't make it complicated, email or text them. And you gather that information, you think to yourself, okay, when I look at themes across the board, are these the things that I want to be known for? And, also look at the themes on the development areas as well. Okay, what do I really need to be focused on? Because now you don't just have an idea or imagination of what people think about you. Now you have the data, and this is ultimately what your brand is. And the fact is, we all have a brand. The fact, whether or not we're in control of the brand or if the bad is just happening, that's the question. And so by doing this exercise, one, you have awareness of what people are saying about you, what your brand is out there. And then two, you can decide, is this really what I want to be known for? If so, awesome. Let me double down and continue to do the things and maybe add even more. If not, if there's a gap between where I am and where I want to be in terms of my brand, now I come up with a strategy. I write down, okay, these are the things that I want to be actually known for. In my case, I said, I want to be known as someone that was a very strong coach, right? That I was able to help people move from this command control style to creating an environment where they're using coaching skills to bring out the brilliance in people. And then second, I also wanted to be known as someone that was an inclusive leader. And so what I started to do was I started coaching a lot more leaders in the organization. And I started giving lunch and learns around inclusive leadership. And I knew it worked when, well, first of all, I was consistently doing those things on a quarterly basis, really going back, tracking on my spreadsheet, what are the actions that I took to develop my brand. And I'll never forget when I left the organization that I was working in, the manager I was working with at the time said, I really enjoyed working with you. And the 2 main things that I really enjoyed from working with you is that you gave me a more global, inclusive mindset, and also that you really helped me understand the power of coaching to drive high performance. And so it worked. And frankly, now that I'm running my business, I have a couple of trainings that I have coming up now around doing inclusive leadership trainings for organizations. And a lot of that is referrals from people that I used to work with when I was in corporate 7, 8 years ago, that is still coming back and paying me to this day. And so that I is really important. The visibility, I talked about it before. If nobody knows how great you are, then you're not going to get ahead. So the visibility means you take that high visibility project, you work on cross-functional projects, you make sure have an opportunity not just to present to your managers and his peers, but you're one-over-one. You even do volunteer events, right? Like organizations have volunteer days, but finding different ways that are natural, especially if you're an introverted person. Like you might not feel necessarily comfortable going up to an office and say, let me take you out to have a coffee chat. But if you work on different things that naturally give you exposures to others, it's an easier way to get visibility. And then the A in the Diva method, which is the last step, is building your advisory board. And this is a group of people that consists of mentors, coaches, sponsors that will open doors for you that you can't open for yourself. And this board is who's going to help you get the position, get the promotion, get the raises, because a lot of times we, again, think it's just about the hard work, but how much easier is it if the right person knows how great you are in terms of delivering results? And they say, you know what, this is a good role that Keisha would be or Angel will be qualified for, put her in the job. you're going to have a much easier time getting the role if you have a recommendation from a person in a position of power than if you were trying to do it all alone and all by yourself. And so that's my 4-step diva method to getting ahead professionally.
And that's great advice because you've kind of outlined the steps for someone to position themselves and showcase their value. And I want to shift into the compensation part because, you have someone who's positioning themselves for the promotion. And sometimes I've seen in corporate where these promotions are sometimes it's a lateral move, sometimes it's not vertical, sometimes it's a new title, but you're not necessarily making more money. So, what strategies can someone use to have a confident and successful conversation about compensation? And then there's always like timing, like when is the right time to ask for promotion? So, two questions there.
Yeah, I love these questions. First of all, I say always, always negotiate. The thing that I said before around your building your brand, your image, one of the things that it helps you to do is take stock in terms of all the things that you have delivered results on, right? So that's why I don't see delivering results is not important. When you're going to have a salary conversation, you've got to come. This is a business conversation. This is not charity. So you're going in the room and say, you know what, these are the contributions that I have made to the organization, and this is the impact on the department. The impact could be financial. It's easy if you're in a revenue generated role. This is how much additional revenue I've brought to the organization. If you're not, it could be in the form of cost savings. If you're in an enabling function like finance or HR, even in HR or some other role, you could talk about how things that you've done to contribute to a more engaging culture that may be tied back to reducing attrition, which ultimately saves money. So really thinking through the high impact areas you've worked on, the projects you work on, how it's benefited the department, how it's benefited the culture of the organization. I call it your brag bank. Even when people send you an email and say, thank you so much for your support. We couldn't have done this without you. Save all those emails, save the information. That's all evidence that you're going in. So that when you go into this conversation now, you're starting out and I always say start off on a positive note. Like, I really enjoyed being in this role. I feel like I'm learning and growing and I've been able to contribute in all of these ways. So you're able to outline the 2 or 3 or 4 contributions that you've made. And as a result of the impact that I've made, I think I want to talk about the possibility of getting a salary increase, or there's a role that's open that I want to apply for. Can I get your support in applying for this role? And, that would be a promotion. And so the key here is being positive and then going in with actual data on why you think you should be promoted because of the impact that you've made. I also would say, in terms of timing, think about before, especially if it's not a promotion, but you're just asking for a salary increase, you want to justify that with your performance, but you also want to do it before the money has been already allocated to someone else, before you start going through your salary planning season. I worked for a number of years in compensation and benefits myself, and I would say if your salary planning process kicks off in November, let's say, for example, for the next year, then you want to have that conversation 3 or 4 months before. And you may not know exactly when the salary planning process kicks off, but you do know when you're having performance discussions. So every year, you may have a performance discussion at the end of the year. Then you start that conversation in August or September, because by that point, it's beginning to be thought about, but the money isn't already allocated to someone else. So that the leader will have an easier time getting the budget together. If there is a catalyst event, like a big position that's coming up that is being posted, then have the conversation right then and there.
Great advice, Keisha. And sometimes, yeah, people are looking forward to the promotion or the raise. And, the last few years, there's so many companies that have not been on track with their revenue goals and targets. And I've seen companies put a pause on promotions, put a pause on salary increases, or put messaging out to say, like, if you're not being promoted, then there's no salary increase. So, how should an employee handle that rejection if they're not getting the promotion or raise that they were hoping for?
Are you saying because the organization isn't hitting their revenue, so they put a freeze on
Yes.
salary increase?
So let's say someone's positioned themselves, they've taken all of your advice, they've done your four-step method, they're ready and they've been ready,
Yeah.
but there's a halt. How does that person handle the rejection or prepare themselves to do something else or just stay? Or what advice would you give in that situation?
Yeah, I think we have to be, we're all business people, right? Whether or not we are the leader or the CEO. So I do think we have to take a step back and look at the market and the conditions that we're working with. If you know that your organization hasn't, they're in the red, then maybe they can't justify giving you the actual dollar amount. So maybe there are other creative ways. Like we think about it just being a compensation, are there other ways that would benefit you that you can negotiate? So it could be additional vacation days. It could be, reimbursements for education. Like looking at all the ways, the creative ways that you can, maybe it's stocks, right? So maybe you're negotiating stock options. So right now the company is doing well, but like we expect the price of the stock to go up in 10 years. Can you get a part of that equity? So it may not just be a salary thing, taking a step back and looking at all the different aspects of what would make it worthwhile for you to stay with this organization and stay engaged and working on negotiating that. I think reasonable companies and reasonable leaders would be flexible in doing that, especially if they recognize that, oh, like she's not getting or he's not getting stuck on just a dollar amount because they understand the position that we're in. Also, the thing that you can say as well is just like, okay, I understand we're in this position now. When do you think can we revisit this conversation in 6 months? Right. And so don't just say, can we revisit this conversation? Put a line and then schedule time on the calendar 6 months later to follow up with the conversation so they know you're serious. So those are the proactive things I would say to take on. You always have the option to go somewhere else. That has to be said as well. If it is a case where, they can afford, but they're not giving you the salary increase, you want to find out if there is a performance issue. And if there is, how can you bridge the gap from where you are now to where you could be considered in the future? And if all of those things don't work out, then you may want to look at other organizations inside or outside the industry if it makes sense for you to go somewhere else where they will pay you what you think you are worth.
Really great advice. And Keisha, I know we're nearing the end of the show. I just have one more question. And you've shared really great tips for someone to position themselves, show value, how to navigate the conversation around compensation. But I want to know from your perspective, like how important is mentorship or sponsorship in achieving the promotion and the right compensation? And how can the professionals find the right mentors?
Yeah, I love this question. It's everything. It's really important to think about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, right? Mentor is someone who has experience in the area that you need help. It could be, let's say you are a finance person, you're just starting out. A mentor could help you understand and to learn and to understand concepts much faster to bridge the gap from where you are now to where you want to be just from a technical standpoint. But a mentor could also be, let's say you are a working mom and you look up in the organization and you see a woman executive that also has children as well, and you're just starting out and you're a mother. Maybe that woman can help to mentor you. It's like, these are the pitfalls. These are the things that I've done to overcome the challenges. So find somebody who has the experience or the background in the area that you need help. That's what a mentor is going to help you to do and to teach you, even from a compensation standpoint. You may want to brainstorm with somebody else who you know is a good negotiator and how to approach the conversation or the situation. Now, here's the thing. They say this specifically for women and people of color that this category are overly mentored and under-sponsored. It's there's somebody always willing to teach you something, but if that person doesn't have positional power, if they're not the person that can ultimately make a decision, then at the end of the day, you may need someone with that positional power that will be like, all right, Keisha's good at the job, hire her. That's the sponsor. The sponsor is going to open doors for you that you cannot open for yourself. And you need both, right? You need somebody to teach you the tricks of the trade, but you also need someone with power that will walk in and say, you know what, put her in this role, give her the salary increase so that you don't have to fight for it as hard. And this is a key component that I think is missing from people's board of directors. And how do you find that? How do you find these people? Well, for mentors, a lot of organizations have mentoring programs. If you join different employee groups, they have mentoring programs. You can ask HR to connect you, or you could just ask someone that you admire and you respect and say, look, I would love to learn from you around this area. Sponsor is a little bit harder. It would be great if you had a mentor who also had a positional power. So when they get to know you, they could also convert into a sponsor. But one of the best ways to do this is go back to the V I talked about is visibility, working on those cross-functional projects, making sure that you're delivering results. It's just like you think about basketball players or any athlete, they're going to attract sponsors because you're winning, right? Gabby Thomas, Olympics won so many times during the Olympics. Guess what? All the different companies, all the different brand names are going to want to jump on being a sponsor to her because they know she's a winning brand. So you have to make yourself a winning brand to attract the people and then put yourself in positions, whether it's networking, whether it's working on cross-functional project, whether it's volunteering so that you can get in front of the people that are with power. Even asking for introductions could be good.
Really great advice, Kisha. And I just want to thank you for your time and thank you for sharing all of your insights here with us today. I know so many people can really take some actionable steps to move forward. Now, for those that are wanting to connect, what's the best way to connect with you?
Perfect. I am on everywhere by my name, Kisha Winter with a Y, Wynter. First name Kisha on LinkedIn. Primarily, that's where I hang out, or on my website, yourpowerunleashed.org.
Awesome. We'll share the links in the show notes. Any last words for our audience today?
Yeah, we talked a lot about owning your power. I have a book that's coming out called Your Power Unleashed: How Savvy Women Use Courage to Get Promoted, Get Paid, and Find Fulfillment. So definitely check that out. The last words I want to share with you is we spend the majority of our working hours at work. And really, if we're not satisfied and fulfilled in our work, that's a substantial portion of our lives that we're not happy. And so I always encourage people, don't just try to wait for vacation or for the weekends to enjoy your life. Find something that is fulfilling, that's aligned to your values and that you can make an impact so that you can go to work inspired and being able to tap into that inner power every single day. If you're able to do that, I think we would live a lot more fulfilling lives.
Thank you for tuning into another inspiring episode of Leading Beyond Limits. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to hear more from our incredible guests, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us. And if you have a remarkable leader in mind who you'd like to hear on our show or any questions and comments, feel free to reach out to us. You can find our contact information in the show notes. Remember, leadership knows no bounds, and with the right insights and determination, you too can lead beyond limits. Until next time, keep reaching for the stars and leading with purpose.